Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Welcome, welcome. My name is Josh Medeiros. I have the privilege of serving the City of Bristol as the Superintendent of Parks, Recreation, Youth, and Community Services. I'm so pleased to invite and welcome each of you to the Boulevard for this historic event. We are going to be celebrating 100 years of history right here in Bristol, Connecticut. Let's give a round of applause just for 100 years. The park that we're standing in was donated to the city in 1921 by Albert Rockwell, philanthropist and industrial tycoon, and now serves as the gateway to the city of Bristol. Since its founding 100 years ago, the park has had many great additions. The focus of today's event is to explore this park and visit the various stations where you will learn about the history of the Boulevard, learn firsthand from Bristol historians and veterans about Bristol's rich military history and influence that led to the establishment of each of our monuments here today. There will be music throughout the day, which is the amazing Bristol Brass and Wind is here, as well as our high school marching bands. Give them a round of applause. We also have a number of games and activities kind of stretching the whole length of the Boulevard, so you're going to get your steps in today, walking around, checking everything out. We have an arts and culture station way down there. Many of you have probably noticed our new tree carving artwork down there, so he's here to talk about that, as well as a bunch of stations up towards the front. If you have not done so already, we invite you to come visit our Bristol Parks, Recreation, Youth, and Community Service booth. We have brochures of today's event, as well as a map, so you can kind of see where everything's laid out, and you can pick and choose where you want to spend your day. We are really excited to have everyone experience what the Boulevard has to offer throughout this beautiful day. The event you're able to enjoy today is the culmination of over 18 months of planning from our team, our Board of Park Commissioners Events Committee, and many community volunteers that provided input along the way. I would like to start by recognizing the chair of our events committee, Commissioner Paula O'Keefe. If you want to step forward. Paula was instrumental in the planning process, and she was also responsible for designing our Centennial logo, as well as our beautiful postcards, commemorative postcards that are available for sale right down at our booth. So let's give a round of applause for Paula. I would also like to acknowledge Sandy Bogdansky and Commissioner Cindy Donovan from our Parks Events Planning Committee. We appreciated their contributions and guidance throughout the past 18 months. We'd also like to thank our partners at the Bristol Historical Society, the Memorial Military Museum, and the Bristol Veterans Council for their collaboration. Thank you. I want to give a special acknowledgement to Carol Dennehy, who helped shape this event very early on and provided a lot of guidance along the way. As well as thank you to Tom Dickow for his many contributions, including a monthly column showcasing the Boulevard leading up to this event. So let's give a round of applause. I, of course, want to acknowledge our Parks team members who are here today and have been involved in this event. First and foremost, a shout out to our Park Supervisor, Bob Lincoln, and the entire Parks crew for their hard work in beautifying the Boulevard each and every day, but especially leading us up to this event today. The park looks great thanks to their continued efforts. I also want to acknowledge our Deputy Superintendent, Sarah Larson, who just walked up on stage. She's also our resident history buff and has made many contributions to this event, including some in-depth research to help develop our signage and some of our storyboards. So let's give it up for Sarah. I'll have Lauren Bent step forward as well. Lauren is the city's new arts and culture supervisor, and she was responsible for coordinating the arts and music portion of this program. And then lastly but not least, Erica Benoit, our community engagement coordinator, for all her efforts marketing this event, designing our brochure, designing our sponsorship packages, and just so much more that I can't even list. Oh yeah, no, so we're good. We'll acknowledge our whole board. For the 100th anniversary, we did not have a budget for this event. We didn't use city funds. Instead, we relied solely on the generosity of community sponsors. and I am so grateful to each and every one of them. Thanks to our sponsors, we raised over $20,000 to support this event. That's incredible. Absolutely remarkable. At this time, I want to recognize our silver sponsors, which include Collier's Project Leaders, Roland Dumont, The Pines at Bristol, Locked In, Team Bristol, and Wheeler. Round of applause for our silver sponsors. I also want to recognize our highest level sponsors, which were our gold sponsors, which we are so appreciative of their support today. This includes the Barnes Group, Inc., Covanta, QA&M Architecture, Bristol Housing Authority, Walmart, and D'Amato and Downs Joint Venture. Let's give a round of applause. The full list of all of our sponsors and partners and contributors is available in the program guide. So again, if you haven't received one, please see our booth over there in the blue. We ask you to thank our sponsors and let them know that you appreciate all that they did to contribute to this event. I also want to acknowledge, before we introduce the mayor of the city, we have our city councilors here on the stage. City Councilwoman Mary Fortier, Brittany Barney, Scott Rosado, who is also our liaison to our Board of Park Commissioners, Councilman Peter Kelly, and Councilman Greg Hahn, as well as the rest of our Board of Park Commissioners, including Bob Callett, who's volunteering. So at this time, I want to introduce the mayor of the city of Bristol and the chair of our Board of Park Commissioners here in the city. She's going to deliver the city greetings and remarks. Welcome, Mayor Ellen Zappa-Sassi.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on the Boulevard. I know that many of you are here because the Boulevard means as much to you as a symbol of our community as it does to all of us up here. We are the benevolent caretakers of this great boulevard and the 100 years of history, both good and bad, through all the wars and conflicts that it has represented for everybody in the community. I'd like to also just do a shout out for the City Council and our Board of Finance and all of our city departments who worked so hard to make sure that this maintains the gateway appearance that it should. Draw your attention to the far east section where we're doing a bridge replacement. That bridge replacement will be done probably in December, but in the spring you are going to see a beautiful aesthetic treatment that is worthy of the boulevard being added to it. There are display signs down there for those of you to get an idea of what that's going to look like. We're also replacing bridges over here and over there, and then obviously you've seen the work that is being done on the Memorial Boulevard School. Not only will it be a magnet school to diversify our educational opportunities for all of our families, but we are also going to have a beautiful theater that will be an economic catalyst for downtown as we start to make all of our changes. Everything is really starting to come together. But at the very heart of this, it's always about the people in our community, the volunteers, the people who have worked here in the Parks Department for years to make sure that it always looked the way that it did, and bringing together all of those community celebrations, including those with music, the parades, the solemn processions, the Veterans Memorial celebrations that we have here. All of that really culminates in us as a community putting value here on the Boulevard. And I would just like to do a special shout out to veteran Mr. Nate Orphis, who's sitting over here. He is 97 years old today. So think about that. Mr. Orphis was 3 years old when all of this was being built. And I can just imagine we'd all close our eyes and think about that. All of the talk and everybody talking about what was happening downtown when this boulevard was being laid out. Maybe his parents even took him for a walk down here, but to think that we actually still have valued members of our community here, that their families were probably part of this. Many families probably helped build the boulevard, and so now we have its second life coming forward for the next 100 years. I'd also like to recognize Beverly Strong, who's actually sitting next to Mr. Orphis, the widow of Ralph Strong. She's one of probably the remaining World War I widows that we have in the country, and she belongs here in Bristol. So please give a special shout out to them. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. And And please do take a moment to stop and read not only the boards about those who gave the ultimate price in the name of our democracy, but all of the other booths that are here. Take a look at the new banners that the Veterans Council and the Parks Department put up honoring our Korean War dead from, they've been up for a while. And also just, again, look at the inscriptions, look at the names. They were all part of our community and they will continue to be because we have this as a monument to them. Thank you.
Okay, so just to give you a quick rundown, we will have some music momentarily, and then you guys will be free to walk the boulevard. We have stations all the way down to the bridge construction, and then it spans all the way down here to the end of the trees down to Napa. So please make sure you visit down by the World War I monument. There's some school project updates that you can catch up on, as well as make sure you visit with all of the different very generous veterans that are here to share their experiences and stories with everybody, as well as how the monuments came to be. Then we're going to join back here around 4:30, and we'll be starting to do our closing remarks. We're going to be having a time capsule down by World War I. So we'll be doing a ceremonial closing, some additional musical performances, and then please make sure you stop by and grab your brochure. And then if you guys have any questions, our staff will be at this table as well. But thank you to everybody who has been here today. Thank you to everybody on stage, and we're excited to celebrate with all of you.
I'm standing in front of the Revolutionary War Monument here on Memorial Boulevard in Bristol. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Boulevard. And this monument was just dedicated in 2015, and it shows a Revolutionary reenactor in his uniform. A picture of him was taken, and it was sent to the Granite Company in Vermont where it was carved. And the whole monument is granite, and it lists the patriots who died here from Bristol. There was a group of ladies from our local Catherine Gaylord chapter that researched the soldiers from Bristol, and they are listed on the front of the monument. On the back of the monument, there are a list of the battles that these soldiers fought in. Some of them died from disease, some of them were wounded in battle, and some of them died on prison ships. They were held by the British.
So we're here to celebrate the 54 men from Bristol who died during the Civil War. Their leader was Newton Manrose. Newton Manrose was a resident of Forestville. He was a professor of chemistry at Amherst College. He formed Company K of the 16th Connecticut Infantry, and as a group, they served in the South, and their first major battle was the Battle of Antietam in September 17, 1862. And Newton Manrose, together with the 69 men from Bristol, stepped onto the battlefield, and within a few minutes, Newton Manrose had been shot in the chest by an enemy cannonball. And one of the fellows that carried him off the field commented that he could look into this huge gaping wound and actually see Captain Manrose's heart beating. Obviously, Captain Manrose died from his wounds. 2 years after that, in 1864, the whole company was captured at the Battle of New Bern, North Carolina. They were sent to the notorious prisoner of war camp in Andersonville, South Carolina, or Georgia, and as a result, because of the terrible conditions, 25 of those remaining Bristol men died from various illnesses and starvation and that type of thing. Ultimately, the city of Bristol raised enough money 8 months after the Civil War ended to have one of the first monuments in the West Cemetery. That monument still stands today. It's pictured on the plaque on the top left-hand corner, and it's 25 feet of brownstone. It's at the highest point in the cemetery, and it's dedicated to the 54 men, the same men that are listed on this plaque that passed away or were killed during the Civil War.
I try and represent what a typical infantry soldier from Connecticut would have looked like, and I show the equipment that they use and so forth. One interesting thing is these buttons were molded from original castings of Connecticut troop buttons, so they're very accurate, very realistic. And as you can see, everything was made from wool. I guess it was pretty difficult to acquire cotton during the Civil War because it was produced by the South. So I've been doing this for many years, mainly to keep alive the memory of my great-grandfather who served in the 18th Connecticut Infantry and served in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and was wounded and captured and served in Andersonville Prison, Georgia, which was a horrendous place to be. And he somehow survived and came back to Connecticut and lived another 30 years.
All right, the World War II monument here on Memorial Boulevard, our beautiful Memorial Boulevard, has the name of the 139 men from Bristol who were casualties during World War II. We are At the Memorial Military Museum, we're fortunate to have a wonderful collection of men who survived and men who did not. And among them were represented, and we remember them by saying their names and telling their stories. One of the men, the Gold Star men that's on the monument, was Lieutenant Colonel Claire Conselman. He was attached to General MacArthur's staff on Corregidor. He was a West Point graduate, and when Corregidor fell, he was captured and put on a hell ship to be sent to Japan. While that Japanese ship was in a bay in Japan, filled with American prisoners of war, unfortunately, it was bombed by an American Navy planes, and he died there. Another Bristol man who is listed on the monument is Lieutenant John Lynch. He had been attached to a B-17 unit in Clark Field at the start of the war, and he also died on a hell ship, which was sunk in the same in the same harbor, the same month in the same year, this time by American Navy planes that bombed the ship. So we've had various stories of how men served and how they sacrificed their lives here in Bristol. No Bristol service woman died during the war, but many served in all branches of the service. I think 113 women. Two Bristol brothers are named on the monument. Their parents were immigrants from Italy, and Rocco and Philip Tusta each died, ironically, fighting for the Americans in World War II in Italy.
A little something about the monument to my rear here. This was one of the very first, if not the first, Vietnam Veterans Memorial put up in the state of Connecticut. It went up in 1973 and was dedicated on Veterans Day, November 11th of 1973. I know I'm going to miss some of the names, but the Yard Brothers, Arthur Ward, and others put together a fundraising campaign to put this up. And they raised enough money to not only put up this one on the boulevard, but the money they had left over, they put one in the center of Forestville with very similar design to this. Okay. And for the record, there were 17 names on the back of this monument. Those are the men that were killed in action in Vietnam. Their ages range from 40 years old down to 16. And I try to make a point when I talk to young kids, think about where you were when you were 16 years old. You know, I already had a woman come by here today and wanted to know what the difference between a conflict and a war was. She honestly did not know the difference between the two. And for anyone who doesn't know, the only difference is, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, a war has been declared by Congress. If it has not been declared by Congress, then it is called a conflict. Okay, but I can tell you, you can talk to anyone who's ever served any conflict and or a war. There is absolutely no difference between the two. They are exactly alike. But it's an honor to be here today. I hope people come out to see this boulevard. 100 years old this year. It's one of the longest, largest veterans memorials in the state of Connecticut. I wouldn't doubt that it's probably one of the biggest in the entire country. And if you look around, you'll see how the park department does an absolutely stellar job of keeping this place pristine and treating it like the hallowed ground that veterans think that it is.
The monument we're standing in front of is the Korean War Memorial. And in 1994, a gentleman by the name of Jack Vanden Heuvel decided that because there was no monument on the Memorial Boulevard for the Korean War, he'd like to establish one and have one built for it. So he got 15 members together, which I was included with, and we all went out and we did all kinds of fundraising and raised the money to put the monument up. And it was put up on Memorial Day 1996. The deputy from Korea, from Washington, came to actually dedicate the monument. That was done on Memorial Day of 1996. And ever since then, it's just been one very, very important thing for the Korean veterans of Bristol. The money for the monument was raised through the generosity of the people of Bristol. The bridge that you're looking at was originally a wood bridge that was put up by the Korean Veterans Association. But what happened was it was vandalized several times and a lot of the spokes on the side broke. So we decided to do some fundraising, and we fundraised $13,000 to be able to put up this steel bridge, which is now much, much better than the wood one.
Albert Fenimore Rockwell was born in Woodhall, New York in 1862, and he came to Bristol around 1888 with an idea for a new doorbell. Along with his brother Edward, they started the New Departure Manufacturing Company here in town. They manufactured a variety of different bells, and then eventually they got into coaster brakes and then ball bearings. And by 1916, New Departure was part of General Motors. But Albert went on from there. He became a philanthropist. And he was influenced by something that happened in 1893. That year in Chicago, there was the Columbian Exposition, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus coming to America. But what was more important about that exposition was the grouping of the way the buildings were presented by a group of architects who were trying to show at the time what city life could really be like, as opposed to the way city life existed at that time, which was highly crime-ridden and quite dirty. So what was created from that was the City Beautiful movement, which spread across America. One city here in Connecticut did take an exception to it, and that was Waterbury. But Albert never forgot that. And by 1919, he was one of the largest property owners here in town. And he owned this land that we're standing on, which was then known as Dunbar Meadows. It had been previously owned by the Dunbar family. They were involved in clock and spring manufacturing. And what Albert envisioned originally was a reservoir for New Departure, but he nixed that idea and decided to build housing instead. But then he decided that wasn't such a great idea. So then he decided to give the land to the city, but with the idea of building a grand boulevard into the center of Bristol. And again, this came out of that City Beautiful movement. By 1921, the boulevard was completed, and it was considered one of the most beautiful streets in the state of Connecticut at the time. Now, there was something else that was added along the way, a brand new high school. Albert Rockwell gave an additional 12 acres of land for $1 for the building of the new high school. Now, these two ideas weren't totally accepted by a lot of people in town, but in 1919 there was a referendum, and a lot of people, the basic people, the people who worked in his factories, the people who worked in other factories, the common people, if you want to use an expression, they had decided that this was a great idea, and they supported Albert in his ideas for a new high school and the building of the boulevard. Now, the high school originally, there was a competition for an architect, and the architect that they chose was Wilson Potter. He was originally from New York. He lived on Hollister's farm in Forestville on Emmett Street. And when he designed the original building, it was nothing more than just a few classrooms, a small library, and some office space. But Albert Rockwell felt, no, a modern high school needed three things. It needed a gymnasium, it needed an indoor swimming pool, and it needed a theater. Now, of course, again, there was a lot of opposition to this, but eventually Albert won out. And when the school opened in September of 1922, it was not only considered the most modern school in the state of Connecticut, it was also considered a model for the rest of the nation. I think Albert Rockwell today, if he could come back and take a look at what he sees here, I think he'd be very proud to know that even after 100 years, we still have this boulevard, we still maintain it. It is still a memorial. It was quickly became a memorial shortly after it opened in 1921, and he even supported that idea as well by donating 48 pin oak trees for each person who had died in the Great War, what we call World War I today. And he would also be proud of the fact that the school that he had fought for is going to remain a school. The monument that I'm standing in front of is known as the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, but we here in Bristol refer to it as the World War I Monument. It was dedicated in 1924, but before even dedication took place, there was a competition for an architect. And the architect that they finally chose was Harold Hayden, but he had to meet 3 qualifications, and he did. Those 3 qualifications were that he had to have lived in Bristol, which he did, even though he wasn't born here, but he had lived here ever since he was a small child, and he was educated here. Second of all, he had to be a professional architect, which Harold Hayden was. He was also an engineer. And third of all, the architect had to have served in the Great War, and Harold Hayden did. He was a lieutenant in the U.S. Army. So he met all qualifications, and as I said, the monument that we see here today was originally designed by him, and I forget how high it is. I think it's about 120 feet. I'm not really sure exactly of that, but it's been here since 1924.
I was born in 1937, December 5th, and I married a World War I veteran. We had a wonderful life together. We played a lot of tennis. He was a great tennis player. We've seen all over the country. And we had a lot of fun. We had a wonderful life. We walked together 5 miles a day. I could say it was a greatest time of my life. And I miss him very much.
Well, Jay and I got this assignment. When we sat here, we probably didn't know too much about World War I, but now we know a hell of a lot more. As people come by and we share information. This fellow right here, he was from Southington, and that's his actual picture of him in uniform, and that's his actual dog tags and uniform. So as people come by, they share World War I stories with us. So I guess we're learning as much as we teach. So yeah, it's been quite interesting.
I'm sure Bob told you about what Albert Rockwell contributed and so forth. He contributed half the cost for the school, half the cost for the boulevard, and he also donated extra land. But one thing that people really don't realize what he did is he also gave a tribute to the World War I soldiers that died in battle. So he donated 48 pin oak trees. There's 24 on this side of the boulevard, starting on John Bresnahan, which is B, and then you cross over the boulevard, and coming down the boulevard, there's 24 more, and those are basically the other part of the alphabet, and it ends with John Zilko down here. In 1976, Jack Dennehy, the director of the Memorial Military Museum, said, it's just not enough to have the trees here. Why don't we name a tree after each one of the soldiers? So there were markers put in, and each marker contains the name of the soldier, the branch of the military service that he was in, and the date that he died. Unfortunately, what happened was, entering into the military during World War I, people enlisted a lot of different ways, okay? Some of them enlisted out of town, and they did the very best to find out how many people died in World War I. There were 48 listed on that monument over there, okay? But the truth of the matter is they found 6 additional names after that was on the monument. So they added another marker right here with 6 additional names. And so there were really 54 members, Gold Star members of World War I. Some of the trees have had to be replaced. For instance, this first one, why don't we walk over here? This one is dedicated to John J. Bresnahan, who died October 23rd, 1918. He was a member of the Army. And then each tree is now marked with what we call a Hickey marker. Those went in 1976. The Bristol Park Department installed them and paid the entire cost of them. This tree was put in this year on Arbor Day by the Daughters of the American Revolution as a replacement of a tree that was needed because it had been taken down. The Bristol Park and Recreation Department has committed itself that they will, any tree that is ever taken down will be replaced by what we call a pin oak tree, so that 100 years from now, none of us will be here, but the people then will be able to appreciate Albert Rockwell's contribution as well. So there's 48 of them going down, 24 this way, 24 coming back, a total of 48. In 1968, I believe it was, there's a marker down the boulevard on what we call the commemorative side, which is dedicated to World War I, dedicated to the soldiers that died, but it also memorializes that Albert Rockwell gave these oak, and they put one oak behind that marker to honor him for being a benefactor to the city.
And we're here today celebrating Memorial Boulevard 100th anniversary, and we're extremely excited to share with our community the opening of Bristol Arts and Innovation Magnet School in the September of 2022. And with me, we also have Principal Architects, QA&M, and Downs D'Amato, who's doing all of our construction, as well as my Deputy Superintendent. And we've been sharing our program with the families as they visited our table.
I was hired to come out to Bristol and the Memorial Boulevard Park and carve this huge pine tree and put as many animals as I could, make it something fun for the community, something that everybody could enjoy, something that didn't matter which direction you're going by it, you'll see a different animal, and hopefully bring a smile to your day, whether you're coming or going, and maybe brighten you up a little. At the very top I have an eagle that's perched, then I have a bear that's holding a cardinal, I have a squirrel hanging out, I have a raccoon that's kind of climbing over the top, and a deer at the base, and something hidden from the people in the road is an owl in the back that's tucked into the tree.
All right, we have just celebrated a 100-year anniversary, our Centennial celebration of the Veterans Memorial Boulevard. I'm joined by our Deputy Superintendent, Sarah Larson, and several of our Park Board Commissioners. Commissioner Cindy Donovan, Commissioner Paula O'Keefe, who is the chair of our Events Committee, and Commissioner Bob Fiorito. We are closing the time capsule, which will be buried here on the boulevard in a secret location. And that information will be provided to a few people for when it's opened 100 years from now into the future. So we will see you back. We won't be here in 2121, but we look forward to the next generation of park stewards. So thank you for a great celebration, and we'll see you in 100 years.